So welcome to the Node API meeting for Node add-on API meeting for August 25th. Before we get started, does anybody have any news that they would like to share? If not, then I'm going to share the screen here with, if I find the right one, with the issues we normally go through. So we just talked about whether there is any new news. Don't think there is any there. In terms of adding the list of C language bindings, we know that that's sort of being worked on, but I don't think there's any update. I don't know if anybody has any updates on the coverage side of things. Okay, no enabling debug testing add-ons, haven't done anything. So that takes us to looking at the stale issues. Okay, so we don't have any new stale issues. Vladimir continues to work on the implementation for one related to the 1140, but I don't think there's any updates unless anybody has something they'd like to share on that one.
Yeah, I reviewed it, and now I have a question that I'd like to get clarification from the team on when we have some time when we get to it.
Well, why don't we discuss that now?
Okay, so the implementation looks good to me, except for one thing. Vladimir set it up in such a way that if we cannot run JS because we're in the GC, it fatal errors out. And I think we should turn that into an API status instead of a fatal error. Like we have an API cannot run JS, right? So we should have one. And at first I thought we can reuse that because you cannot run JS because you're inside the GC, right? And so let's just use the same status that we've already added for the purposes of the environment shutting down, right? And so I tried it. I grabbed his branch. I replaced all those fatal errors with just returning this status and basically changing like we have the status is determined by calling env arrow can execute JS or something like that. And the definition of that in NAPI env is true, because so far we have had no reason to say that you cannot execute JS. However, node API, the subclass of NAPI env, node NAPI env, overrides that and introduces this environment shutdown thing where you cannot run JS if the environment is shutting down. Mm-hmm. And so I changed it. I said, okay, look, change the superclass to say you cannot run JS because you're inside GC, right? And then the subclass calls the superclass and adds its own restrictions, right? So then I've basically conflated the two reasons for not being able to run JS, right? One being environment shutdown, and one being we're inside the GC, right? And it makes sense because you can't run JS in either case, right? However, the problem I ran into is that if you do that, then you cannot delete references anymore, because we have an API delete reference, and an API delete reference with Vladimir's changes requires an environment that is not inside GC. And if you don't distinguish between being inside GC and environment shutting down, then you cannot delete references during environment shutdown by hand. So the user cannot delete references because it will return something not an API okay, and then that will usually go down an error path that ultimately leads to failure. So what I figured is one of two things. Either we need to really take a look at these reference managing functions. Do we really need can we really not run these during GC is one way to look at it. And I believe there's a good reason why we cannot run them inside GC, which is that the native data associated with an object for which we're deleting the reference is stored as a private property on the object, which means that it's a property access essentially, in which case you cannot do it during GC. So I suspect that's why That's why Vladimir added the check to the delete reference. The alternative is to introduce a new status, and I commented about that on the PR that says node API GC running. And so things like an API delete reference, they return that when the GC is running. And that is different from an API cannot run JS. And at that point, the value an API cannot run JS sort of becomes basically equivalent to an API environment shutdown, which I believe is what we should have called it, but we didn't know at the time whether we could apply it to other situations where we cannot run JS or not, because we only had the one situation. Now we have two, and it turns out that we cannot use the same value for both situations, at least as far as I can tell. So
my first question though is, like, the whole purpose of this change, if I'm remembering the right one, is that, you know, if you want to run, we're trying to make it so that by default you can't run JavaScript in your in your destructors, or I forget whatever the finalizers, but that if you want to, you got to write a little extra bit of code, which will then, you know, you make this extra call, you can do this. So I'm back to, like, the right thing to do is actually to throw that exception, right? Because, like, to throw the fatal error, because otherwise we're counting on somebody checking the error code, doing the right thing when they've clearly done something wrong, like coding, like the code is wrong. There's not really like a thing like that says, hey, I'm going to get this and recover from this, because, like, if they wanted to write JavaScript, they should have been calling that other method where they could, right?
Yeah, it's been our policy to always return a status and let the add-on handle it. Like I made the same mistake when I did thread safe function. Like it throws an error, actually, like calls like an API throw instead of returning a status, and it's just a new mechanism, you know what I mean? And the thing is that, you know, most NAPI code that I have seen will go down an error path if it doesn't return NAPI. Okay, the first thing everybody always does is write like node API call, define this macro called node API call, which will do something drastic if the return value is not an API. Okay.
Sure, yeah, I'm just still, though, that like in this case, the whole thing is like, in the exceptional case where you have to write JavaScript, do this. And like, I'm just wondering if it helps, if it's more helpful to actually have it be like, no, you made a mistake. You don't want to fail. You want to know and modify your code to do the right thing. You know, put that wrapper in. Like, so failing with something that says like your code's trying to do this, this is how you fix it, is going to be more helpful to people. Like, we're not, this is something new, right? So we're not breaking anybody, I don't think.
No, that's right. Yeah.
That's just sort of where I'm coming from, is like, we could go, we could, but it almost seems like the simpler approach is the right one. So to do something, I mean, I think what you were describing, like, it's another option, but probably more complicated from the all the issues you brought up. And it's like, is it really going to improve anything for anybody?
Right. So, okay. All right. Okay. That's,
I could be wrong, but like, that just, I was saying, like, that's kind of when I think about it, I'm like, the whole point was to like turn that into a very narrow exception case. And if you've missed adding the code to hit your exception case, you really wanted to write JavaScript. Like, you basically said, you know, we've effectively, you know, now, because it's not originally there, that, you know, as you move up to a new version of Node API, it's going to be like, hey, if you need to run code, but like, even in that case, I think the assertion, like somebody in the developer, they run their test suite, they get the assertion, it'll be clear they missed adding it when they wanted to, right? Versus like having an error, and then I don't know what they do with that error.
okay. All right. Yep. All right. Yeah, we can go this way. It really is an alternative, I guess.
Yeah, I you know, if you think about it some more, and it's really like, no, there's good reasons or whatever, then, but that was just
Yeah, I mean, to my impression, the developer cannot do anything regarding the return to status, right? They if they call trying to call JS in the finalizer, in the pure finalizer, and it returned a status rather than API okay. I'm not sure in such case how can developers handle this error code since they cannot rethrow JavaScript errors in these conditions too.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, so there's nothing they can do with it. Yeah, okay.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's fair. Yeah, so you might as well just kill the process.
yeah. Well, I have another point that I'm not quite clear about is that why can't we delete the reference in the pure finalizer? I may be missing the point here.
Yeah. So yeah, that's an independent question. I haven't really looked into it. Basically, last week, Vladimir told me that he went through the whole like API, and he sort of picked the APIs which ultimately end up executing JavaScript, and this was among them, and I think I'm trying to remember. Yeah, I'm not 100% sure. I'd have to trace through the code. But that's an excellent point. Like we may be able to remove this check which creates a fatal error if it fails from some of the APIs. So Changzhang, maybe have a look at the PR and see where Vladimir is adding this check GC access, which APIs is adding it to, and let's maybe try to minimize the list of places where we add this, because the more places we add it, the more places will fatal error
Yeah.
if they get
Oh,
called from the add-on.
also, I think it might be valuable to build node add-on API against the PR since you know node add-on API has a lot of exception handling in its code base, so it might be good to check that it can it will not crash on the finalizers.
Yeah, so for what it's worth, we have a unit test which was doing well. Okay, never mind, because that's environment shutdown. Okay, no, never mind, wrong unit test. Yeah, okay, so yeah, let's look at that too, and then sort of try to see which APIs we need to really protect.
Yeah, of course. I can I can take a look at it.
Okay, cool. All right. Yeah, so that's all I had. Okay, so then I will change my mind, and I will accept the fatal error for this change. I'll make a comment to that effect.
Sounds good. Okay, anything more on that one to discuss before we move on to the next one? If not, then the next one is number 1119. In terms of the force node API and caught exceptions policy, I think Chenzong, I saw that you submitted a PR, which I
Yeah,
LGTM didn't started the CI on. So
the PR, yeah, I just submitted it early yesterday. Its number is in 49313 in
here,
the
yeah, where
node
did I
pull request.
find that? I'm gonna node pull requests. I'll paste that. I'll edit here and so that we have that. So, oops. So that's good. Anything more
Yeah.
we should chat about on that?
Well, not exactly. No, yeah.
Okay. And that takes us, I think, to the end. Vladimir said there's no other updates. So I think that takes us to the end of the list of ones that are in the stale issues. So we can pop over to the ones in the repos themselves. We've got a number of PRs here. I see these are all related to the dependencies, so nothing really to discuss there. Here, I'm just looking, let's see, instantiation. Looks like Kevin's jumped into this. There's grassing, that's great. I think, Gabriel, you had an idea here. I don't know if you want to discuss it or.
Yeah, I talked about it with Vladimir last week briefly. So my idea was to, well, and you, Cheng Zhong, right? You were there last week as well. My idea was basically that, you know, we can probably use type inferencing to detect whether a finalizer provided by the user calls any functions which require JavaScript access, and we can automatically wrap the whole finalizer in a Node API post finalizer for them if they do that. And ideally, and I'm not sure that C++ type inferencing is good enough. Ideally, we would do this without any code changes on the user. So they always get an NAPI : environment, yes, but in reality, that NAPI : environment ends up being a specialization of a template, which depends on whether that NAPI : environment is getting passed into ultimately any Node APIs which require JavaScript access. If it does, then the type inferencing will tell us that it has to be a specialization which causes the finalizer to be added using Node API post finalizer. Whereas if all calls made in the body of the finalizer are ultimately pure after all the inlining and everything, then the specialization ends up being that which attaches the finalizer directly. And so if we get this to work, then everybody who has already written code that does finalizing, which happens to be pure, is all of a sudden going to benefit, and the, you know, the perceived memory leaks from a synchronous busy loop of creating, you know, native backed objects is just going to disappear overnight with a single recompilation and without them having to change any of the source code. So that would be ideal. The other aspect is that we could make this explicit, where we explicitly have two environments, and if your finalizer accepts the pure environment and you accidentally make a call to a Node API that needs a JS that cannot run inside GC, then your compilation will fail, saying that, you know, no override exists with you know, a pure environment for this particular node add-on API method. So you need to pass in a JS environment, and you're like, oh, okay. So, I guess I need to do the post on Node API post finalized version because I'm making that.
Yeah. That one's I think I see how we could, like, the first
that one is simpler,
or like magic. The second one is like, I can see what you're saying there. So okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so for the second one, we basically need a bunch of overrides, you know, like we need like two versions of each, you know, one with a pure environment, one without, and then the ones that require a pure environment will that require a JS environment will simply not have the pure variety, and then it will fail. So yeah, that's a simpler solution. The other one is quite a challenge.
Yeah,
I'm not sure it's even possible, but it would be awesome if it were.
Yeah, that would be some C++ magic for sure.
Yeah.
But the other one where, like, basically you get a compile error, right? That would be an interesting.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that would be very beneficial, because you would never see a fatal error that way. So you know, because it just fails at compile time.
Yeah. Okay,
Anyway,
so it's
so that's
basically
the
open
idea,
there
yeah.
to, so we don't forget that and,
Yeah.
okay. Otherwise, I don't, is there any others? I don't see any recent stuff. Is there anything else that we should discuss? If not, I will pop over to the node repo. We talked about this one already, that Chenzong's opened. Any of these others that need? This one's been. Right, this one, I guess there's some discussion, there was some discussion back and forth, and I don't know if anybody has enough insight to have a thought on these changes to the headers.
Well, I may need to take a deeper look into the WASM 64 since as far as I can tell, WASM 64 is still experimental, right? Since it requires big-int support in the JavaScript. Yeah, I definitely need to look into it.
Okay. So yeah, that one I think could, otherwise, any others that we should chat about this week?
Yeah, I think I have encountered a CI failure that it seems like Gabriel has been has worked on. The PR number is 486 and 7.
This one right here, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
this one. Yeah. It seems like we are reusing the source files and source file between different targets, and Chip isn't happy with the reusing. So I found that Gabriel has been copying the source file in all the tests. So maybe, yeah, I was looking into it and see if we can find a better solution just than simply copying it.
Okay, so is this related to, like, I guess it's like how we've constructed the test? Is it, or is it an issue that people are likely to run
Yeah,
into?
we are reusing the, like, say, common.c and entry.c so that we can reusing the entry between different targets.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so it's a way we put our test together and trying to reuse code and stuff like that.
Yeah, so the fundamental reason behind it is that the JS native API tests, the tests themselves do not have anything node specific in them, right?
Right.
The only thing that makes them node specific is in their parent directory, they have a common.c and an entry point.c. Well, the common.c is not node specific, but the entry point.c is node specific because you need to somewhere declare like an NAPI add-on, right? Or
Right,
NAPI
yeah.
module. Otherwise, you cannot run them with Node. And so the idea was originally that you can replace that entry point with the entry point for your particular environment and your environment's way of loading add-ons. And then you can use the same tests in your own environment and you just replace this one file and the other ones can stay unchanged. But it looks like JIP is very bad at accessing things in the parent directory. It doesn't like it. And the strange thing is it doesn't like it on some platforms and it does like it on others. And it's the same JIP. And so you would think that the code is platform independent, but somehow it isn't. And so that's why I went with this really kludgy way of copying the file. But yeah, I admit it's not a good solution. It just happens to make the unit tests work on our testing infrastructure.
So it's basically this common.c you've ended up having to copy in some cases?
I think it's entry point or maybe both. I'm not sure, but yeah,
Okay.
like one of them raises problems. And
Okay.
so, yeah, they're definitely worth improving if we can.
Okay.
Yeah, I probably need to take a look into it to see if we can migrate away from the Commodore C or something. Yeah, maybe I can do it in another PR since we have to change a lot of other tests too.
Yeah, is this, correct me if I'm wrong, Changzhong, is this the situation where we have like multiple targets in the node JIP and then you have to copy the file? Because if you only have one target, you're fine. I think that's the bug, right?
Yeah, in
Yeah.
this particular PR, we are reusing the source files and adding flags, adding definitions to the new target.
Right.
So that
Yeah.
so that the same code can behave differently with the targeted API, node API versions, right? So that's
Exactly.
the point
Yeah. And the first time I did that, I did that to one of the unit tests where we introduced like, where we are checking for an API cannot run JS in the new version and an API pending exception in the old version. And so we have to have two different add-ons compiled with different flags, and so they behave differently. And when I added that second target, that's when I ran into this issue where it does that. And so I had to do this copying thing. And I think now you're running into the same issue. Yeah. Okay.
Right.
Yeah. Okay. Got it. Yeah. So I don't know. I mean, we controlled node JIP, right? So this may be like it may be beneficial to just fix this in node JIP. But I know it's difficult to do without breaking anything.
Well, if this sounds a good path forward, I believe I can try to sum it up and submit the PR to the Node.js too. Since I believe the JIP and Node.js are both in the Node.js organization, right?
Exactly. Yes. So this may be a good fix.
I believe, right. I can take a look into it.
Cool.
Yeah, that's all the issue I'd like to talk about this time.
Okay, that sounds good then. Oops, sorry, have I gone to share? Am I sharing the wrong window? I guess so. Anyway, okay, if that's all there is to discuss this week, then we'll see everybody next time. Thanks. Bye.
Sounds good.
Thank you.
Talk to y'all
See you
later.
next
Bye.
time.